The Lost Key Part 5, The Final Spire. The apex tower did not belong in the city. It was a shard of obsidian glass piercing the clouds, a 70-story needle that seemed to absorb the surrounding light rather than reflect it. To the pedestrians on the street, it was just another marvel of modern engineering, the headquarters of Frost Enterprises. But to Julian Mercer, standing across the street in the shadow of a newsstand, it looked like a wound. "It's vibrating," Julian whispered. He adjusted the heavy leather glove on his right hand. Beneath the leather, the brass and matte black metal of his arm was humming, the gyroscope in his palm spinning in agitated counter-rotation to the building's frequency. "I don't hear anything," Evelyn Hartwood said, checking the load in her pistol. She looked tired, her coat stained with the grime of the river and the interstitio, but her eyes were sharp. "You wouldn't," Julian said. "He's broadcasting on a subfrequency. He's not just building a skyscraper, Evelyn. He's building a tuning fork. When he turns that thing on, he's going to shatter the structural integrity of reality in a 10-mile radius. And rewrite it," Evelyn finished. "Vane's theory of the fifth door. If you can't find the door, you build one." Julian looked up at the penthouse, shrouded in mist. "The opening ceremony is in an hour. The mayor is there. The press. Frost is going to trigger the device under the guise of a light show." "We can't get past security," Evelyn said, nodding toward the phalanx of private military contractors guarding the lobby. "They have scanners. They'll pick up your arm before we get within 50 feet. Julian smiled, a grim, tight expression. "We aren't going in through the lobby. We're going in through the architecture." He stepped out from the newsstand. The rain had started again, cold and sharp. "Julian," Evelyn hissed, "where are you going?" "To the foundation," he said. "The building is new, but the ground is old. The city remembers." They circled the block to a narrow alleyway that ran parallel to the Apex's service entrance. It was blocked by a heavy steel gate, welded shut. Julian approached it. He didn't look for a lock. He placed his gloved hand against the brick wall adjacent to the gate. He closed his eyes. He didn't just feel the texture of the brick. He felt the history of the clay. He felt the heat of the kiln that fired it in 1920. He felt the mortar, and he felt the empty space behind the atoms. Open. He clenched his metal fist. The brick wall didn't crumble. Simply untied itself. The mortar liquefied, and the bricks rotated 90 degrees, sliding apart to create a perfect rectangular opening, silent as a whisper. Evelyn stepped through, shaking her head. "I will never get used to that." "Don't," Julian said, following her and waving his hand. The bricks slid back into place, sealing them in the dark service corridor. "If you get used to it, you stop respecting it. That's Frost's mistake." They moved quickly through the basement levels. Julian navigated by instinct, the key in his arm acting as a dowsing rod, pulling him toward the source of the vibration. They bypassed patrols by stepping into the shadows, literally. Julian found that if he angled the light just right, he could fold the darkness around them, rendering them invisible to the naked eye for seconds at a time. They reached the central elevator bank. It was guarded by two men in tactical gear. "I can take the one on the left," Evelyn whispered, raising her weapon. "No," Julian said. "No bodies. We're not murderers." He reached out with his metal hand, aiming at the control panel on the wall 30 feet away. He focused. He visualized the copper wiring inside the wall. He visualized the electrons flowing through the circuit. Short sparks showered from the panel. The fire alarm blared, a deafening, strobe-lit chaos. The sprinklers erupted. The guards shouted into their radios, distracted, looking up at the ceiling. "Now," Julian said. They sprinted past the guards, slipping through the closing doors of the freight elevator. Julian jammed his metal fingers into the keypad inside the car. The electronics shrieked as he overrode the lockdown code. "Penthouse," he commanded. The elevator surged upward, moving faster than any civilian lift. The G-force pressed them into the floor. "He knows we're coming," Evelyn yelled over the roar of the wind in the shaft. "The alarm wasn't just for fire. He's watching the grid." Let him watch, Julian said, watching the floor numbers blur. He thinks he's the architect. He's about to find out he's just a tenant. The elevator slowed at the 68th floor. The doors didn't open. Instead, the ceiling of the car began to glow red. Thermal cutters, Evelyn shouted, diving into the corner. Lasers sliced through the steel roof of the elevator. Frost wasn't taking chances. Julian looked at the walls of the car. They were reinforced steel. Hold on, Julian said. He placed both hands on the elevator wall. He didn't try to break it. He tried to change it. Steel is just iron and carbon. Iron is malleable. Carbon is brittle. Separate them. The metal groaned. The wall of the elevator turned gray, then crumbled into dust, blowing away in the shaft wind. Jump! Julian yelled. They leaped out of the moving car onto a maintenance ledge just as the elevator cable snapped, sending the car plummeting down into the dark. They were stranded on a narrow I-beam 70 stories up, inside the hollow skeleton of the spire. Above them, the machinery of the tower roared. The stairs! Julian pointed to a service ladder spiraling up the central column. They climbed. The air grew thin. The hum of the key in Julian's arm became a scream. They were close to the source. They reached the roof access door. It was heavy, blast-proof. Julian didn't bother with finesse. He struck the lock with his metal fist, driving the bolt through the frame with the force of a piledriver. The door flew open. They stepped out onto the roof. The wind was ferocious, whipping Evelyn's hair across her face. The view was staggering. The entire city spread out like a circuit board of gold and amber lights. But in the center of the roof stood the machine. It was a chaotic assembly of stolen history. Frost had cannibalized the vein building, the library, and the pump room. There were brass gears welded to fiber-optic cables. There were ancient lenses focused through modern lasers. And in the center, suspended in a magnetic field, was a singularity. A tear in the fabric of the world, held open by brute force. Standing on a platform above it was Caleb Frost. He looked different. He wore a suit that seemed to be woven from the same matte black metal as the key. His eyes were covered by a visor that pulsed with data. "You're late for the ribbon cutting, Mercer." Frost's voice was amplified by the suit, booming over the wind. "Turn it off, Caleb," Julian shouted, walking forward. The roof tiles cracked under his heavy boots. "You're forcing a door that doesn't exist. The structure can't take the weight." "The structure is weak because you are weak," Frost retorted. He raised a gauntlet hand. Vane was a romantic. He wanted to dance with reality. "I want to pave it." Frost clenched his fist. The air around Julian solidified. It was like walking into invisible concrete. Julian gasped, freezing in mid-step. "Gravity manipulation," Evelyn shouted, raising her gun. She fired. The bullets stopped in mid-air, inches from Frost's face, then dropped harmlessly to the deck. "Kinetic dampening," Frost sneered. "I learned a few things from the codex you left behind, Ms. Hartwood." Frost turned a dial on his wrist. The singularity in the machine flared. A beam of violet light shot up into the sky, punching a hole in the clouds. Thunder rolled not from the sky but from the ground. The building began to shake. "He's anchoring it." Julian gritted his teeth, fighting the crushing pressure of the solidified air. "He's trying to merge the apex with the ley lines. If he finishes, the city becomes an extension of his will. He'll be able to delete streets, erase people, construct laws just by thinking them." "Julian," Evelyn yelled. "The codex." Vane wrote a failsafe. She pulled the heavy metal book from her bag. She didn't open it. She held it up. "The frequency," she shouted. "Read the harmonics." Julian looked at the book. He couldn't reach it. He was pinned. "I can't move." "You don't need to move," Evelyn screamed. "You're the architect. The book is just paper. You know the math. Feel the building." Julian closed his eyes. He stopped fighting the air. He extended his senses downward. He felt the steel beams of the apex. He felt the rivets. He felt the arrogance of the design, rigid, unyielding, brittle. Vane's architecture was organic. It swayed with the wind. Frost's architecture was totalitarian. It fought the wind. And what fights the wind eventually breaks. Julian focused on the vibration of the tower. It was a high C-sharp, dissonance. Julian began to hum. Started low in his throat, a growl. Then the key in his arm picked it up, amplifying it. The gyroscope spun so fast it became a blur of blue light. He broadcasted a counterfrequency. A low, grinding B-flat. The air pressure around him shattered like glass. He was free. No! Frost roared. He leaped from the platform, landing with a cratering impact in front of Julian. Frost swung a fist wreathed in crackling energy. Julian caught it with his metal hand. The impact created a shockwave that blew the windows out of the penthouse floor below. They stood locked in a stalemate of impossible strength. Frost, the tyrant of physics, and Julian, the negotiator of reality. "You're just a clockmaker," Frost spat, pushing Julian back toward the edge of the roof. "You fix broken things. I create new things." "You don't create," Julian strained, his metal arms sparking as the servos whined. "You just break things so you can sell the pieces." Julian looked past Frost at the machine. The singularity was widening. The violet beam was growing unstable. The fifth door was opening, but it wasn't a door to knowledge. It was a door to the void. "Evelyn!" Julian shouted. "The lens! Shoot the lens!" Evelyn was pinned behind a ventilation unit by the wind. She looked at the machine. The central focusing lens was shielded by rotating brass plates. "I can't get a clear shot." "I'll give you one." Julian roared and released his grip on Frost's hand. Instead of striking back, Julian grabbed Frost's lapels and threw himself backward. "What are you?" Frost gasped. Julian slammed his metal hand into the roof deck. Liquefy. The roof turned into quicksand. Julian and Frost sank instantly, plunging through the ceiling of the penthouse below. They crashed onto the marble floor of Frost's office, surrounded by debris. Up on the roof, the machine was unguarded. "Now, Evelyn." Julian's voice came over the comms. Evelyn stood up, fighting the gale force wind. She timed the rotation of the brass shields. Click, click, open. She fired. The bullet struck the crystal lens. It didn't just crack. It shattered into a million diamond dust fragments. The laser beam fractured. Instead of a single column of light, it sprayed wildly in all directions. The singularity collapsed in on itself with a sound like a dying star. Down in the office, Frost screamed as his suit lost power. The connection to the machine was severed. Julian pulled himself out of the debris. His metal arm was scorched. The leather glove burned away, revealing the intricate clockwork beneath. Frost lay amidst the ruin of his desk, coughing blood. The visor was cracked, revealing one terrified human eye. You ruined it," Frost wheezed. "Do you have any idea what I could have done?" "Yes," Julian said, standing over him. "That's why I stopped you." The building groaned. The structural integrity was failing. The vibration Julian had started, the dissonance, was tearing the tower apart from the inside. "The building is coming down," Julian said. "We have to go." "I'm not going anywhere." Frost laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. "I am the captain of this ship." Julian looked at him with pity. He turned to the window. "Evelyn!" he shouted into his comms. "Get to the service lift. The core is stable, but the outer shell is shedding." "I'm at the hatch," she replied. "Where are you?" Julian looked at the window. It was a sheer drop of 70 stories. "I'm taking the express." Julian ran at the window. He shielded his face with his metal arm and smashed through the glass. He fell. The wind tore at his clothes. The street rushed up to meet him. He didn't panic. He extended his metal arm. He aimed for the side of the building. Magnetize. His arm slammed into the steel support beam of the tower's exterior. Sparks showered like fireworks as he slid down, metal screeching against metal, slowing his descent. 60 floors. 40. 20. He hit the pavement of the plaza with a heavy thud, cracking the concrete. Steam hissed from his arm. He looked up. Evelyn was running out of the service exit, coughing in the dust. Above them, the apex tower wasn't falling. It was changing. Without the machine to hold its impossible geometry, the top 10 floors were dissolving, turning into harmless clouds of glass dust that glittered in the morning sun. The rest of the building settled with a deep, resonant groan, locking into a dormant state. It stood there, a decapitated monument to hubris. Julian walked over to Evelyn. She looked at him, then at the tower, then at his arm. "It's over," she said softly. "The opening ceremony is cancelled," Julian said, wiping dust from his face. Police sirens wailed in the distance. The spell of the apex was broken. The city was waking up, confused, but safe. Epilogue. The Watchmaker's Promise. 3 weeks later. The sign on the door of the shop on Barrow Street read Mercer Antiquities, closed for renovation. Inside, however, the shop was very much active. Julian sat at his workbench. The magnifying loupe was over his eye. He was working on a pocket watch from the 18th century, a delicate thing of silver and pearl. His right hand, the metal hand, held the tiny tweezers with impossible precision. He had learned to control the strength. He could crush a diamond, or he could cradle a moth's wing. The bell above the door chimed. Evelyn walked in. She looked different, lighter. She wore a trench coat and carried a rolled-up set of blueprints. "The police report ruled it a structural failure," she said, leaning against the counter. "Faulty materials. Frost Enterprises is bankrupt. Caleb Frost is missing. Presumed buried in the rubble." "Presumed?" Julian murmured, snapping the watch case shut. "He's gone, Evelyn. I felt him slip through the cracks. He's in the interstitio now. A ghost in the machine." "And the key?" she asked, looking at his hand. Julian flexed his fingers. The blue light in the palm was dim, resting. "It's quiet," he said. "It knows the door is closed." Evelyn unrolled the blueprints on the counter. They weren't of a building. They were a map of the world, marked with strange, glowing symbols. "I found something in the codex before I archived it," she said. "Vane didn't just build in this city, Julian. There are signatures in London, in Prague, in Cairo." Julian looked at the map. He felt a familiar pull in his chest, the thrill of the puzzle. "The architects," Julian said. "He wasn't the only one." "No," Evelyn smiled. "And you're not the only guardian." Julian stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the street. The rain had stopped. The sun was shining on the wet pavement. The city looked normal. But Julian could see the golden threads of probability weaving through the traffic, the heartbeat of the metropolis. He was no longer just a man who fixed clocks. He was the keeper of the time. He turned back to Evelyn and picked up his coat. "Cairo," Julian said, testing the word. "I've never been to Cairo." "I hear the architecture is timeless," Evelyn said, opening the door. Julian Mercer stepped out of his shop, locking the door behind him. He touched the metal key in his pocket. Not the great key, but the simple iron key to his home. The adventure of the lost key was over. But the work of the architect had just begun.